In the cold silence of the Genesis 7 orbital facility, artificial lights hummed to life over rows of glass chambers. Within the largest pod, the apex predator stirred, Subject X-9, a living weapon. The cryosteam hissed as containment locks disengaged. Technicians in insulated armor stepped back cautiously, their movements tight with reverence and fear. They knew what emerged from that chamber wasn't just engineered for war, it was war. He stepped forward, unshackled. 7 feet of sinewed terror, a perfect fusion of alien physiology and human DNA, armor-plated skin glistening like obsidian under the lights. He moved without hesitation, eyes black as oil and just as fathomless. There was no need for briefing. The Apex was built to obey. Orders were embedded directly into his neural pathways, activated by command. This time, the directive came not from a console, but from the Supreme Director himself. Terminate Commander Lyra Voss. No witnesses. No remains. Elsewhere, across the void of space, Lyra Voss stared through the viewport of the Argon Lance. Her jaw was set in a line as rigid as the ship's hull, her breath fogging the reinforced glass. Stars streamed by like slivers of broken glass. She was alone, technically not in command, but every soldier on board still called her commander. Habit, or maybe hope. The military tribunal hadn't stripped her of rank, just reassigned her, diplomatic cargo escort, far from the core systems. It was a punishment dressed as protocol. She hadn't objected. After Erebos 4, where she disobeyed the direct order to abandon a civilian colony under siege, her name had been whispered in high-level circles. Hero to some, traitor to others. She saved lives, but cost the Council its clean victory. That, more than failure, was unforgivable. The intercom cracked. Approaching rendezvous coordinates, said Lieutenant Kane from the helm. Docking in 5. Lyra turned. Her armor was old but pristine, brushed silver with matte black trim. No medals, no insignias. She didn't need them. The scar on her left temple, partially hidden beneath cropped dark hair, said more than her dossier ever could. In the cargo hold, the crew sealed crates of medical supplies. A humanitarian drop, supposedly. But Lyra had learned long ago that truth was fluid in the galaxy's outer rings. She tapped her datapad. No names on the manifest, only designations and coordinates. She didn't like the silence. It had the stench of politics. Unbeknownst to her, deep within the ship's secondary hold, a cargo pod hissed open, one not listed in the manifest. X-9 stepped into the darkness, silent as vacuum. He didn't need weapons. He was one. But one had been given to him regardless, a plasma rifle keyed to his biosignature. Target data uploaded, Commander Lyra Voss. Image, profile, past missions, complete. She was already marked. The Apex moved with inhuman precision, bypassing biometric locks, invisible to sensors. The military had designed him to be a ghost. In the end, they feared insubordination more than enemy fire. That's why they created something that couldn't ask questions. He found her in the command corridor, flanked by 2 junior officers. Her posture told him everything. Alert, skeptical, dangerous. She turned before he made a sound. Her eyes narrowed. "Who the hell are you?" she said, reaching for her sidearm. The Apex raised his weapon. Time slowed. Voss moved first, sliding back, leveling her pistol, finger brushing the trigger. X-9 adjusted his aim. Her vitals flickered on his HUD. One shot. Center mass. Efficient. Clean. But he didn't fire. Something stalled. Not in the rifle, but in him. An echo, faint and jarring. The shape of her face, the timbre of her voice, something slipped between the algorithms. A noise. A memory? "Stand down," she shouted. X-9 hesitated. A rush of boots. The corridor swarmed with soldiers. Sirens erupted. An unauthorized presence had triggered internal defense protocols. Lyra's squad raised weapons, but X-9 didn't move. Instead, he lowered his gun. Then he knelt. Silence fell like a guillotine. The soldiers held fire. Voss stared, her weapon shaking slightly in her grip. "What is this?" she muttered. "What trick are you pulling?" X-9 looked up. For the first time in his existence, he chose not to kill. He couldn't explain why. The programming screamed in protest. Commands flared red across his vision. Terminate. Complete directive. But he refused. One of the soldiers edged closer. "Commander, That's an Apex unit. I know what he is, she said, eyes never leaving the kneeling figure. I just don't know why he's doing this. She stepped forward, slowly, like approaching a volatile mine. Can you speak? X9 didn't respond. Do you understand me? A pause, then a faint nod. The crew's nerves snapped. Commander, we need to eliminate it, now. Voss raised a hand. No. With respect. I said no. She snapped, her voice flint. He could have killed me. Didn't. I want to know why. No one moved. The Apex remained kneeling, rifle placed at her feet like an offering. She looked down at it, then back to him. It made no sense. These things weren't capable of restraint. That was the point. Take him to the brig, she ordered. Restrain him, but don't hurt him. I want full scans, DNA crosschecks, everything. Quietly. This doesn't go in the logs. They obeyed. Guns trained on him. For soldiers encircled the Apex. He rose calmly, submitting to cuffs without resistance. His black eyes flicked to Lyra one last time before he was led away. As soon as he vanished, Kane approached her. What now? Lyra turned to the viewport again. The stars still drifted, cold and indifferent. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then, quietly, now we find out why the galaxy's deadliest weapon just chose not to obey. Far above them, the High Command watched through black box feeds, faces drawn and pale. Their control had faltered. A system that was never supposed to think had just made a choice. And that terrified them more than any enemy ever could. The ship's brig was designed for pirates and smugglers, never for something like him. Reinforced gravimetric fields shimmered faintly in the air, humming low like a warning. Subject X9 sat cross-legged in the containment cell, hands bound behind his back by neural inhibitors, head bowed as if asleep. But he wasn't resting. He was thinking, a process new to him, unsettling in its depth. Across the chamber, Commander Lyra Voss watched him from behind the glass, her arms folded and her jaw tense. She hadn't slept since the encounter. The footage had been scrubbed from the system, the witnesses sworn to silence. She couldn't risk the ship's AI flagging an unauthorized presence and alerting the Central Military Network. Whatever this thing was, whoever he was, it was dangerous enough to warrant a quiet execution, and that made her more curious than afraid. The Apex lifted his head. His eyes locked on hers through the glass. It wasn't the blank, hollow stare she expected. It held weight. Awareness. Not entirely human, but not mechanical either. Subject X9, she said into the mic. Do you know why you're here? He didn't speak. He hadn't said a word since his surrender. Voss exhaled sharply. Why didn't you kill me? He tilted his head slightly, almost as if considering whether the answer would be worth the effort. Then, at last, a voice, modulated, deep, but undeniably shaped by choice rather than programming. I remembered. Voss blinked. Remembered what? There was no reply. She leaned closer to the mic. Your files say nothing about memory. You're not even supposed to have a stable identity matrix. So explain, what did you remember? Your voice, he said after a pause. It was familiar, but not from the mission briefing. That sent a chill down her spine. Lyra cut the audio feed and turned to the technician beside her. Run another cross-check. Pull his DNA code and compare it against the archives. Include military personnel, Black Ops files, and civilians. The tech hesitated. Commander, those archives are encrypted under level Omega. We need clearance from. Just do it, she snapped. Offline. Local only. The tech nodded and disappeared behind a data console. Lyra turned back to the Apex. He hadn't moved. Still watching. Waiting. Within the hour, the results came through, and what they revealed shattered any remaining illusion she had of understanding this situation. Subject X9's DNA was a 93% match to Kale Voss, her brother. Reported Kia during the siege of Varel 10 years ago. Body never recovered. Her knees almost buckled. She staggered back to the observation glass, mind whirling. It wasn't possible. Kale had been one of the first volunteers for Project Genesis, the human side of the Apex prototype program. She'd begged him not to join, but he'd called it duty. Honor. He believed in the cause. He hadn't just died. He'd been repurposed. X9 stood, slowly, as if sensing the moment she understood. You're Kale, she whispered. Her voice cracked. No, he said. Kale died. I am what remains. It was the closest thing to grief she'd ever heard from something born in a lab. The ship lurched suddenly. Alarms blared. Red light bathed the corridors. Voss was already moving before the intercom activated. "Commander!" Kane's voice came through, strained. "We've got incoming. 2 unidentified cruisers just dropped out of warp. No transponder codes. They're demanding we hand over cargo package X9. Her blood ran cold. "Evasive action. Keep us out of their tractor range." "We're trying, but they've got lock." She turned to the guards near the brig door. "Release him." They stared at her like she'd gone mad. "Commander, he's a hostile. We can't." "He's not the reason they're here," she snapped. "He's the target. And he just became our best chance at surviving this." The inhibitors came off. X9 stepped out of the cell like a shadow falling into place. He didn't ask for a weapon. One of the soldiers handed him a plasma blade. He accepted it without ceremony. Lyra fell in beside him as they raced through the corridor. "Can you pilot?" "Yes." "Good. You're going to help me steal a fighter and get us off this ship." "Extraction?" She shook her head. "Evacuation. This crew won't survive a standoff. But we might if we jump." Kane's voice crackled again. "Commander, they've boarded. Hostiles in the lower decks." "Time's up," she muttered. The Apex moved like a living algorithm, precise, unstoppable. He cut through armored boarding drones with brutal efficiency, leaving behind scorched metal and shattered circuits. Lyra covered the flanks, her blaster singing in tight bursts. They reached the hangar just as the main bulkhead exploded inward. A new figure stepped through the smoke, sleek, predatory, another Apex unit. This one clad in silver armor, no hesitation in its movements. "Override protocol activated," it said. "X9 is compromised. Termination authorized." Lyra fired first, but the second Apex was faster, deflecting the blast and surging forward. X9 met it in a clash of kinetic energy and plasma. Sparks flew as blade met blade. It was a mirror match, strength for strength, speed for speed. Voss leapt into the nearest fighter and powered up the system. "Kale, X9, whatever your name is, we're leaving now." X9 parried a strike, twisted under the unit's guard, and drove his blade deep into its core. It spasmed, fell, and didn't rise. He turned and sprinted to the ship, sliding into the seat beside her. She hit the thrusters. The hangar bay dropped away beneath them, stars flooding the cockpit. Behind them, the Argon lance shrank into distance as they punched into warp. Lyra didn't speak for several seconds, her knuckles white on the controls. When she finally looked at him, her eyes burned. "They cloned you, rebuilt you, turned you into a weapon." "Yes. They ordered you to kill me. I refused." "Silence." She reached out, fingers hovering over his arm. "Why?" X9 looked at her, and for the first time, his voice softened. "Because I remembered what it meant to protect you." They said nothing more. The stars stretched ahead like an open wound in space, and they flew into it together, not as soldier and weapon, but as fugitives, survivors, and maybe, just maybe, as something like family. The cold of warp space never seeped into the cockpit, but Lyra still felt it in her bones. The silence that followed their escape was louder than the chaos they'd fled. Every click of the console, every blink of the NAV system, was a reminder of what they'd left behind and what they now carried. She didn't know how far they'd traveled. The coordinates she'd inputted were from an old smuggler's route, untraceable by most Federation trackers. They'd be hard to follow, harder to find, but not impossible. She couldn't afford to believe in impossible anymore. X9, Kale, sat beside her, eyes closed, motionless but not asleep. He hadn't spoken since they left the Argon Lance. Whatever fragment of humanity had surfaced in the brig had gone quiet again. A mask had returned, and with it, an unbearable distance. She finally broke the silence. "How much of you is still you?" He didn't open his eyes. "Enough to remember what I lost. Not enough to forget what I became." Her hands tightened on the control yoke. "You were declared dead. There was a ceremony. Mom never forgave me for not bringing you back. I blamed myself for letting you sign up. You didn't let me. I chose it. Yeah, you and your damn hero complex." A ghost of something flickered across his face. Rhinus, maybe. A faded echo of Kale's old smirk. But it vanished just as quickly. She leaned back, weary. "So what now? We keep running until they catch us." "They won't stop," he said. The Apex directive was never meant to be reversed. They'll send more. Units that look like me. Think like me. But they won't hesitate. What makes you different? I broke protocol. Why? He paused. Because for one moment, something overrode the code. Your voice. A memory that wasn't supposed to exist. Her throat tightened. Then we have to find out why it exists. What they did to you. He opened his eyes now. There's only one place that holds those answers. Level Omega. She blinked. You mean the vault? He nodded. The Central Archive. Deep beneath the Federation's command citadel. Only High Council members have access. Even thinking about breaching it is a death sentence. She exhaled slowly. Good thing I've already committed treason. Kill didn't smile. Then we'll need help. Help meant one thing. Old contacts. Risky ones. Lyra keyed a new set of coordinates into the NAV system. A place called Drift Hollow, a station on the edge of legality and physics. It was built from a shattered moon and anchored to a dead star. Gravity wobbled in half the corridors. Time ran uneven in its lower levels. But if there was anyone who could forge identity scramblers and stealth shields powerful enough to fool Apex tracking systems, it was the people hiding there. The journey took hours. Warp space rippled around them like a living current, but it was uneventful. Lyra caught herself watching Kale as he sat, unblinking, as if he were waiting for something to attack. Always still, always coiled. Human in shape, but something in his presence felt ancient, as though time itself had been used as raw material in his creation. Drift Hollow appeared like a bruise in space. Ugly, sprawling, flickering with mismatched lights. The docking port crackled with static as they landed. Armed sentries scanned the ship and waved them through without a word. Lyra pulled a hood over her head, handed Kale a cloaking mesh to disguise his features, and stepped into the station. The air smelled like coolant and rust. Her boots stuck slightly with each step on the cracked metal floor. They moved through winding markets and broken corridors, past makeshift stalls selling illegal tech and Gmod boosters. Nobody looked twice at them. Everyone here had something to hide. They found her contact, a woman named Thorn, who ran a slicer den out of a converted reactor core. She hadn't aged much since Lyra last saw her, though her arms were now fully synthetic and her eyes glowed faintly red. You're either crazy or suicidal, Thorn muttered after hearing their plan. Vault Omega? You may as well march into a black hole and ask it for its secrets. We're out of time, Lyra replied. They're hunting him, and I need to know what they did to my brother. Thorn glanced at Kale. He doesn't look much like your brother anymore. He's still in there, Lyra said. No, he's more than him now. That's what makes it dangerous. Kale spoke up. Can you get us in? Thorn sighed and leaned back, drumming her metal fingers on the desk. I can get you within reach. But the final access key, it's not digital. It's biological. It requires a living match. Lyra frowned. You mean, a council member? Thorn nodded grimly. And I happen to know one. Old enemy of the Federation. Deep cover. You'll have to find him. Convince him. Name? Kale asked. His code name's Revek. Last I heard, he was laying low on a planet called Verdun's Edge. Lyra pulled the name from her memory. That's a dead colony. Thorn grinned. Exactly. They left Drift Hollow under cover of radiation interference and ghost signatures. The tracker Thorn gave them pulsed with the location of Revek. It led them through asteroid belts and gravity wells, until finally they reached Verdun's Edge. It was worse than Lyra remembered. The surface was scorched, atmosphere thin and toxic. They landed in the remnants of a mining complex, rusted and crumbling, half swallowed by dunes of black sand. Kale moved ahead without fear, his body adjusting automatically to the planet's gravitational flux. They descended into the facility, the darkness swallowing them. He stopped suddenly, hand raised. What is it? Lyra whispered. We're not alone. A shape emerged from the shadows. A tall man in a long coat, a rifle slung across his back, face lined with the kind of wisdom only survival granted. His eyes narrowed as he looked at Kale, then shifted to Lyra. You're the sister, he said. I thought you might come. You're Revek. In the flesh. Or what's left of it. We need access to the vault. Revek raised an eyebrow. Then you'll need to earn it. Lyra stepped forward. What do you want? Not what, he said quietly. Who? He turned and pointed toward the horizon, where a plume of smoke twisted into the sky. A retrieval team came through 3 days ago. Federation Black Ops. They took someone. My daughter. She's the last known genetic carrier of an early prototype. If they unlock her genome, they'll control more than the apex. They'll control the entire next phase. Kale's voice was cold. Where did they go? Rivek met his gaze. You help me get her back, and I'll take you into the vault myself. Lyra nodded, pulse racing. Then we have a deal. As the dying sun bled red across the broken landscape, the three of them stood together, soldier, weapon, and shadow, united by purpose, forged in betrayal. And somewhere beneath them, buried in memory and steel, the truth waited to be found. Night fell quickly on Verdun's edge, but the dark brought no quiet. Dust storms howled like wounded beasts, battering the old facility with gusts of toxic wind. The broken colony was as much a graveyard as it was a hiding place. Lyra crouched beside Kale and Rivek on the edge of a collapsed ridge, scanning the lights below through a cracked pair of optics. The Federation outpost was temporary, a forward operations hub built for speed, not defense. Modular steel walls, energy beacons, a transport shuttle half buried in sand. It looked vulnerable, but appearances lied. Patrols circled constantly, and the telltale shimmer of active perimeter shielding told her someone inside mattered deeply. They'll have biometric locks, she said. No way we're getting through with brute force. Rivek nodded, tapping a small hollow projector on his wrist. A blueprint flickered into view, outlining the compound's layout. There's a ventilation shaft that leads to their genetic archive. It'll bypass the main grid, but it's narrow. Lyra looked at Kale. You think you can fit? He didn't hesitate. Yes. You sure? That's a one-way crawl. Once you're in, there's no turning around. Kale's voice was level. I don't turn back. Rivek handed him a data spike. Once you reach the archive, plug that into their central core. It'll feed me live access. I'll guide you to the holding cell. Lyra touched Kale's arm before he turned to leave. Find her, then get out. No heroics. Something softened in his eyes. I'm not a hero. I'm a survivor. The crawl space was tighter than expected, lined with jagged rebar and coated in years of grit. Kale moved in silence, suppressing all sound, each movement calculated. He didn't think about the darkness around him, only the mission, only the girl. He emerged into the archive chamber, high above the floor on a maintenance ledge. The space was filled with suspended containment pods, each glowing faintly, each housing a sleeping body. The air was sterilized, humming with low-frequency scans. Kale's augmented senses scanned the room, marking guard patterns and monitoring their rhythm. Rivek's voice came through his earpiece. Third pod from the left. Blue tag. That's her. Kale moved like shadow, slipping through narrow walkways and behind stacks of data coils. He reached the pod and stared down at the girl inside. She couldn't have been more than 17. Thin, unconscious, breathing shallowly. Her vitals were steady. She was alive. Opening the pod will trigger a silent alarm, Rivek warned. You'll have 90 seconds before they react. Kale unsheathed a small plasma cutter. Start the countdown. The pod hissed as the seal broke. The girl stirred, eyelids fluttering open. Confused, terrified. He silenced her with a single word. Safe. She blinked, dazed. Who? No time, he said, lifting her into his arms. Hold on. The moment the seal disengaged fully, red lights pulsed overhead. Alarms remained silent, but Kale's internal HUD flared to life. Movement. Heat signatures. They were coming. He moved fast, retracing his path, but the corridor filled with guards ahead. Rivek spoke again, rapid fire. Abort exfil. New path. Utility chute to your right, behind the coolant tanks. Kale kicked through the panel and dropped into the chute, metal screeching around him as they slid into blackness. They landed hard in a lower access tunnel, steam hissing from cracked pipes. Above, footsteps thundered. Rivek's voice crackled. I've triggered an old maintenance drone to create a diversion. Move now. They ran. Meanwhile, Lyra crouched outside the perimeter, listening to every word through her comlink. The moment the silent alarm triggered, she knew things had gone sideways. She drew her rifle and flanked around to the landing bay. If the escape plan failed, she'd steal a transport herself. The docking bay was lightly guarded. She dropped 2 sentries with tranquil rounds and hacked the lock on the closest hovercraft. The engine whined to life as Kale's voice came through. Approaching East Sector Gate. 2 minutes out. Lyra replied. Bay 7's unlocked. Be ready. Then she saw them. Kale carrying the girl, emerging from a blast-warped service hatch with sparks and smoke behind them. Half a dozen guards were in pursuit. Kale ran like a predator, his strength barely diminished by the girl's weight. Lyra took aim and dropped the lead guard with a single shot. Kale didn't stop. He leapt onto the transport ramp as it lifted, the girl still held tight. Lyra jumped into the pilot's seat and punched the throttle. The hovercraft screamed out of the bay, skimming across the dunes. Behind them, the outpost erupted in sirens. They made it back to the shuttle, where Rivek waited. His eyes found the girl and softened. He took her from Kale gently, inspecting her face with trembling hands. You kept your word, he murmured. Kale gave a short nod. Now keep yours. They didn't linger. Veridan's edge disappeared behind them, a dying world fading into the black. The vault loomed ahead, a monolithic construct hidden beneath the Arctic crust of Epsilon Prime. It was ancient by modern standards, built before the first Apex prototypes ever left the test chambers. Invisible from orbit, it only revealed itself to those with the right genetic codes and old warpath clearances. Rivek had both. Lyra watched as the blast doors opened, kilometers of steel groaning in protest. The landing pad lit up with pale blue light, a guiding beacon into the underworld of secrets. Inside, the air was frigid, every breath fogged. The corridor walls pulsed faintly with energy, like a heartbeat preserved in metal. They passed through retinal scans, blood-keyed vaults, and layered security fields. No guards, no drones, just silence and ghosts. The final chamber was circular, its walls etched with data patterns and memory coils. Kale stepped inside, and the room came alive. Lights flared, screens unfolded from the walls. A voice, his voice, recorded long ago, echoed through the chamber. Project Genesis, Phase 0. Lyra turned slowly. This place, it remembers you. Kale stood still, letting the memories wash over him. His former self, before the weaponization, before the erasure. Holograms appeared, footage of him volunteering, undergoing neural mapping, laughing with her, Lyra, 10 years younger. Their parents in the background. Tears welled in her eyes. You were happy. He didn't respond. Then came the darker images. Surgeries. Reconditioning. Synthetic memory overlays. They hadn't just enhanced him. They'd replaced him. The final hologram was a council meeting. Federation High Command. Rivek, younger, sitting at the edge of the table. The others voting. The decision to initiate the Apex Directive, knowing full well what it would cost. They sacrificed you, Lyra whispered. Kale stared at the image of himself, lifeless in a stasis pod. No, they erased me and created something else. But you broke free, Rivek said quietly. You chose something else. Kale stepped forward, touched the central console, and transferred the full record to a secured data drive. Lyra asked, what now? We exposed them. No, Kale said. We dismantle them. You're talking about war. I'm talking about justice. Rivek handed him a second drive. Names. Locations. The last members of the Apex Council. They're still out there. Kale took it without flinching. Lyra met his gaze. You sure you're ready for this? I was made for this. And as they rose from the vault, into a world that no longer knew who its